I'm trapped in a mysterious forest where a strange man only I can see haunts me. My friend Liam doesn't believe me, but I know I'm not crazy. Chapter 16. Author's P. O.V. You look pale, Sky. Is everything okay? Liam asked, and she shook her head this time, not taking her eyes off of the guy. What's wrong? Liam asked and looked at her. He's back. Sky looked at Liam, who looked at her with an unreadable expression, before picking up his fork and continued eating his food. Sky, you should finish your food. I think the blood loss is getting to you, Liam said, and Sky shook her head, looking back at the forest, and found that person leaning against the tree, somewhat smirking at her. Look, he's right there, she said, pointing towards the familiar pale guy, and Liam follows her gaze to find no one. He used his vision and scanned the forest to find nothing out of ordinary. Besides, it wasn't like Carson to show up so quickly. He was too much afraid to attack him when Liam is more vigilant and healthy. Sky, you're just being paranoid. If he was this close, we would have sensed him. You can't think that things like him can go undetected in our territory, can you? He said with pride, and Sky wanted to reply how the guy had gone by unnoticed in the forest area, but she was scared that Liam would take that as an insult and hurt her. Liam had the best warriors, yet he was concerned about Sky. She was most probably just traumatized from the blood loss and was seeing things. Humans do hallucinate a lot. Cool little fellows. Come on. We better finish up and get your stuff before it gets dark, Liam said, urging Sky to eat, who just nodded. She wanted to argue with him and prove her point, but she decided not to anger Liam or the guy who was motioning her to stay quiet from the forest. I must be seeing things, she said to herself, as she grabbed the fork and continued to eat, and heard Liam said something in confirmation. However, she decided to take a glance back at the forest, but the guy was still there, staring at her before he turned into black smoke and quickly disappeared, just like the last time after he used her as a juice box. But something must be wrong. Right, Liam said. They would have sensed him, but the thing was, they hadn't, and she had seen him, even in the forest. When she and Liam were alone, Liam had failed to acknowledge his presence. That must mean something, right? But then why would only she saw him and no one else? Sky started to feel dizzy with all this new information as she quickly finished her food. Soon both of them were done and making their way to the front door. It was getting dark because of the weather, and Sky could feel the cold air nipping at her bare legs. As she clutched the sweater she was wearing closer to her, both of them walked towards the sleek black car, which Sky had seen countless times. How would you drive through closely packed trees? Sky asked innocently as Liam opened the door for her. She muttered a thank you before he got in. You'll see, was all he said, as he put the car in reverse before turning it, facing the trees on the gravel pathway of a sort, which led to the front door of the house. He changed the gear and started speeding towards the dense forest, and Sky looked at the speed meter, watching as the arrow went forward. What are you doing? Sky asked, her heartbeat going out of control as Liam intently stared at the forest. Sky felt this was it. She was going to die. There was no way she would survive the impact if the car collided with the trees, which were getting closer and closer by the second. Sky tried to find a way out, but there was none. Liam wasn't listening to her, nor was the car going to stop anytime soon. Liam, please stop the car, Sky said as tears filled her eyes, but he didn't bother. Liam, please, Sky urged. They were only a few feet away from the dense trees. Liam once again ignored her, as he changed the gears and the car zoomed forward, with so much force that Sky closed her eyes and screamed when suddenly, there was a long computerized beat before she felt the car going down a slope, and the road all of a sudden became smoother. Sky shakily opened her eyes and saw that they were driving down some sort of underground passageway. It was huge. She looked at the rear view mirror and saw what seemed to be a driveway. Mechanically go back up. Sky was breathing hard to the point where her chest was hurting. She looked at Liam. He was completely unfazed. Humorously, there was even a ghost of a smile on his face. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Was this a joke? She was scared out of her wits, and he was smirking. Stop the car, Sky said, and Liam looked at her with raised eyebrows. What Liam began to say, but Sky cuts him off. Stop the car, she shouted. Liam slammed the brakes and Sky shakily get out. Her heart beating crazily. Her head was pounding because of the sudden adrenaline. She grabbed the opposite wall for support before she slid down. Grabbing her head, she closed her eyes, taking deep breaths when she felt someone beside her. Go ahead. Laugh at me. I mean, it's funny to watch me scared, she said, and Liam just sighed. He touched her shoulder and she jerked back. Don't touch me, she screamed, and Liam looked at her shocked. He didn't expect this kind of reaction from her. At least tell me, why are you angry? Liam asked. He was utterly confused. One minute they were driving and the next minute he was smiling, happy for once that the girl of his dreams was beside him. But now she was angry, and he didn't even know why. First you drive like that and scared me, and then you laughed and smirked because I'm not strong enough to take a little push. It wouldn't have killed you if you told me that there was a passageway. I was crying and begging and you ignored me. And now you're telling me that everything is okay when nothing actually ever is. Sky was now sobbing at the end of her rant, and Liam engulfed her in a hug. But she didn't push him away, cooing and choosing her as she sobbed. She had lost it, was all he said as she sobbed into him. She was too fragile, and he made a mental note to be more careful with her from now on. Soon she had quieted down a bit, and Liam once again helped her into the car. You know, I wasn't laughing at you, right? He said, and she didn't even look at him, as she continued to stare out of the window, causing Liam to sigh. He couldn't believe he was doing this, but he needed to be honest with her, or else their relationship won't go any further. I was just happy to have a person near me. That's it, he said, and this earned her attention. What do you mean? She whispered, and Liam gave her a glance before looking back at the tunnel. That was going to disguise her. It's just that I never had anyone compatible enough for me, being the leader. I don't get close to my pack because that's how it is. I can't let them go stray and let them lose these bounds. So I never did have many friends. But I consider you one, and that didn't occur to me until now, he said, partially lying. He wanted to address her as his lover, tell her she was his mate. But that would be wrong because, after all, you can't tell someone that they love you. Sky beamed at what he said. That was so sweet. Thank you. I am sorry for my tantrum earlier, though. It was irrational, she said as they went over a slope that opened to her street. Liam said playfully, and she playfully punched him on the shoulder. Never in a million years could she have imagined joking around with this scary Liam Kane. But here she was, the both of them joking around. They slowly came to a stop outside at her house in the driveway, and Sky looked at it happily, before strolling out of the car and straight to the front door, not waiting for Liam as she heard the car door slammed and a set of footsteps following her. Come on, she said to Liam excitedly, as she opened the unlocked door and strolled in without a second guess. She couldn't wait to get her stuff. The house looked completely ordinary with everything in place. You have an hour to get your stuff, Liam said as two of them went straight to her room, and Sky grabbed a suitcase, opening her wardrobe. How much stuff can I take with me? Sky asked him, and he shrugged, was all he replied, as Sky began to throw pairs and pairs of shoes and clothes into the suitcase, neatly organizing them, while Liam strolled around the room looking at stuff before deciding to lay down on her bed and looked at her, as she neatly folded her clothes and placed them in the suitcase, before she turned to the wardrobe and went crimson. Can you close your eyes for a moment? Sky innocently asked him, and Liam raised his eyebrows before playfully wiggling them. Why? Am I going to get a surprise kiss or something? He asked her, giving her a wolfish grin causing Sky to blush higher. And no, I just have to put my girl stuff in the suitcase, and I don't want you watching. Putting air marks on the word girl stuff, and Liam smirked. You can't make me, he said, and Sky looked at him a bit taken aback. She grabbed a pillow and chucked it at him. That's not a very nice thing to do, especially when you want something, Liam said, and Sky sighed. Can you please close your eyes? Sky said. Say the magic word, Liam said. But I said it, Sky replied, exasperated. Say it. Please. Can you close your eyes? Sky said, and looked at Liam as he placed his hand underneath his chin as if thinking. Only if you give me a kiss, he said, and Sky could swear she looked like a tomato. What? she asked, pretending not to hear him. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Liam said, and Skye looked at him awkwardly, then at the clock. She only had half an hour left before they would have to leave. Oh, okay. But you promise not to look, Skye said, and Liam puts his right hand up with the palm facing her and his left hand on his chest as if taking an oath. I promise not to look, he said, before getting on his stomach, his eyes closed and his face buried between her pillows. Skye took this as her chance and quickly stuffed her garments into the bag before zipping it up. You can open your eyes now, Skye said, relieved, and so now he was lying on his back and grinned at her. He said after a few minutes, and Skye looked at him confused. What? You promised me something, remember? He said as he tapped his right cheek with his finger. Skye blushed bright red as she went near to his side and quickly pecked him on the cheek, causing Liam's wolf to dance with happiness. He was so lost that he didn't see Skye chuck the soft pillow at him. Laughing. What was that for? He asked as he looked at her. Nothing, she replied like a little girl, and Liam, before chucking it back at her, hey, she said, and threw it at him harder, and both of them stared, pillow fighting. Feathers flew in the room as the pillow ripped open, and the two of them enjoyed the moment, oblivious of Carson's burning gaze on them from the start. Chapter 17 Author's P. O.V. Skye walked out of her house with a disposable cup filled with ice cream she had found in the fridge, while Liam got a suitcase, which she had insisted that she could carry herself. The weather was windy, making her hair blow as she looked at the sunset. She looked at the birds flying back to their nest when she finally looked at the open space. It looked dark and mysterious as always, but this time something was off about it. She could see movement there, and before another breath filled her lungs, there stood a very familiar person in front of her, only a foot away. Hello, darling, Carson said, and Skye dropped the ice cream just as Liam came out of the house holding her suitcase. Skye looked back at Carson, who smirked at her, not moving but put his index finger on his lips. Skye looked at Liam, who smiled at her and went to the boot of the car as if Carson wasn't standing in front of her. Skye, you look a bit pale, Liam said, and Skye looked at Liam, then back at Carson, when suddenly she remembered the incident in the morning. Maybe Liam couldn't see him. Her eyes widened and Carson gave her a warning glare, forcing her to answer for the both of their safety. Yeah, I just remembered I forgot to bring my sports gear. It's in a bag under my bed. Do you mind? She said, and Liam smiled. Don't worry, he said, and goes back into the house, causing Skye to whip her head back in Carson's direction in record time. Oh, can I see you? But he can't, Skye asked shakily as she started backing up until her back hits the car. That's my little secret. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. A good magician never gives away his secrets, right? He said, and started laughing maniacally, causing Skye to shake in fear. What do you want from me? She whispered so that Liam won't hear. I don't want anything from you, dear Skye, even though you're quite exotic. It's what I want from Liam that matters, he said, tucking a strand of Skye's hair behind her ear. What has he ever done to you? Skye asked, and Carson laughed, and when she tried to slide away, he grabbed her arm in a tight grip, his nails lightly digging in, causing Skye to clench her teeth from pain. Why don't you ask him? Your alpha male keeps you quite in dark. Ask him about Jason Valentine, Carson said bitterly, and with those words said, his figure slowly turned into black smoke. Skye, the astonished Skye, quickly placed a smile on her face, turning around. Yes, she asked, but her voice was shaky. Why are you crying? He asked skeptically, and that's when Skye became aware of the stickins on her cheeks. No, it's just nothing. Happy tears, you know. I'm just so happy, she added while folding her hands behind her back, tightly clutching the sleeve of the sweater, so no one saw the bruise. What are you happy about? Roughly throwing the duffel bag in the back and slamming the door shut. That we're friends, Skye said in a heartbeat, clenching her teeth as the throbbing in her hand increased, and Liam sighed. He wasn't an idiot. Thank you for that, Skye. I'd like truth, please, Liam said, trying to be gentle, but his voice came out forced. I just remembered my uncle and just got a bit emotional. It's honestly nothing. Nodding her head as the gust of wind blew. Liam sighed. He knew something is up and it was eating him alive. But he didn't press her, as without a word both of them got into the car. But this time not driving towards the pack house. Where are we going? Skye asked as she looked back. I thought I'd show you around a bit. We've got time, besides you haven't seen the town at all. He said, taking a turn so they were now on a really cute street with small shops on both sides. Liam slowly drove as Skye looked at either side with curiosity and amazement. Watching people walk on the pavement. Couples talking and most importantly the shops. These people were free to move around because they were strong werewolves, while she had to be accompanied all the time because she was weak. This thought made her feel small, but there was no commenting on it as she continued to look out at the street. She had never been anywhere but Sydney and can compare to its busy lifestyle. Skye found this extremely cute and saner. Soon the car slowed to a shop and Skye looked to Liam's side to see a cute coffee shop. She read the sign, which was written in a really fancy writing. Espresso. She looked at Liam, who was already out of the car, walking towards her side, and in seconds the car door opened and a gust of wind blew on her bare legs. Come on, he said softly, and Skye nodded, getting out even though she don't usually drink coffee. However, she didn't get the urge to mention that as he held her hand and led her to the entrance of the coffee shop. His touch made her heart beat race and she didn't even know why. As they sat in the corner on a comfortable set of sofa, facing each other. The coffee shop was warm and comfortable, making Skye warm up to her surrounding, even though there wasn't a single soul in the sight. There was faint music in the background. So what do you think? Liam asked her, bringing her attention to him. To my agent extraordinaire, Mythical Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She asked, confused, causing Liam to chuckle at her cuteness. You looked at this place so curiously. I couldn't help but wonder, he said, and Skye smiled. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Peaceful and extremely sane. Back in Sydney, you don't get this kind of stuff. The good stuff, you know. You can't go to a party there without seeing someone stripped naked, she said, and Liam laughed at her comment. Well, you won't have to worry about naked people here at least, Liam said jokingly, and Skye muttered a thank God when she quickly remembered something. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. So I was wondering if you don't mind giving me my cell phone back. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Skye asked sheepishly, and Liam shrugged before reaching into his jeans pocket and took out the white iPhone, causing Skye's face to light up. Thank you. As she quickly reached for it in a haze and clutched it to her chest happily, as cold air nipped on her bare arm as the oversized sleeve had rolled up. What happened to you, armed Skye? She heard Liam's stern voice, bringing her back to reality, and that's when she saw the vicious bruise on her arm and realized her mistake. It's nothing, honestly, she muttered under her breath as she quickly rolled her sleeve down and gave an uncomfortable smile to Liam, who looked angry. Skye, don't you test me. Who did that to you? He asked, calmly, making him look more dangerous. Carson did, she replied and looked away. He inquired. When you went to get my stuff, Skye replied, and Liam looked confused. That's why you were crying. Liam asked, and she nodded. But that can't be possible. I would have seen him. I would have sensed him, he said, and looked at Skye. What if you can't? What if any of you can't? He was there standing right beside me when you came out. But you couldn't see him, and earlier at lunch when I saw a figure. You couldn't find him then too, Skye said, and Liam shook his head. He was confused. That can't be possible. Could it? What else did he say to you? Liam asked turgidly, but Skye didn't answer, but asked the one question he never wanted to answer. Who's Jason Valentine? Chapter 18, Author's P. O.V. Liam's demeanor changed with lightning speed as he looked at Skye with a hard expression. You don't need to know, Skye. He's no one. There's no Jason Valentine, Liam said. I think I deserve to know, Skye said, and looked at him straight in the eyes. Well, I'm not willing to tell about this man, So please don't even ask me about this man again. Understand? Liam said rudely, and Skye looked at him like he had slapped her. How can any of this work? If you don't tell me what's going on, you can't expect me to live with a bunch of werewolves and keep me clueless. Please? I need to, do you understand, Skye? Liam said louder, standing up this time and glaring at her, causing Skye's eyes to fill with tears. She could already imagine her eyes going red and blotchy as the tears gathered. I don't actually, she whispered, and Liam sighed, irritated. What is there to not to understand? God damn it. You don't need to know who the fucking hell he is. Why can't you just mind your own goddamn business? Hell. And stop crying. Why the hell do you end up crying at every fucking thing, Skye? It's getting irritating. He screamed at her, and Skye looked at him, breathing heavily, as tears fell down her cheeks in silence and her lips quivered. So she seriously had no one here. Linda had vanished along with her dad and Blake. She couldn't call her uncle for comfort because he technically had no idea what was going on. Helplessness and a strange sense of loneliness filled her inside as she dully looked at Liam, who was pacing the room, trying to calm himself. He looked at her and sighed, his features changing into sorrow. Skye, he began to say, but was cut off by a loud scream. Liam's eyes quickly whipped to the window, where an extremely pale figure had appeared out of nowhere and in seconds ripped the head of the screaming girl. It didn't take long for Skye to realize what the girl was actually screaming about. There wasn't only one pale figure but 20 or 30 coming into sight out of nowhere. Skye, get under the table and don't move a muscle, Liam said hurriedly, and Skye quickly nodded as she got under the table, not looking at him or outside the window, where another pale figure had decapitated a child. Liam looked at her with sorrow as something came crashing through the window, causing Skye shield ahead with her hands just in case the table ever got knocked over, but it didn't. To their luck, it was a baseball bat and not their enemy. Liam howled loudly before sounds of bone cracking filled the air, and in no time he was on his fours, as he jumped out of the window, leaving her alone in the coffee shop, with an open window for anyone to walk in and kill her. Skye could hear screams and howls but didn't have the gut to peek as she hugged herself, taking deep breaths. She could already imagine the street stained with blood as she silently hoped for the best, even though she didn't know what that was. Screams grew louder and louder by seconds, and Skye could feel that her heart would pop out of her chest at any moment. The cold October night at Basin City had just turned into a battlefield. At times like these, faith was all one needed, with the hope, of course, but that's what Skye lacked. As her mind drifted to the worst but the logical possibility, what if someone entered the coffee shop? Skye looked at the door skeptically. They would most probably know she was there under the table and armed. That would be her stupidity. Skye looked at the baseball bat not far away from her. If she could just reach it, maybe she might be able to defend herself after all. She had no one to rely on. Skye took deep breaths and slowly started crawling towards the baseball bat. She could hear screams in the background as she grabbed the baseball bat and quickly ducked behind the counter, breathing hard as she clutched the bat sided to peek outside the window, and her heart stopped. Everywhere there was bloodshed. It wasn't a big fight, but she could easily say that the wolves were outnumbered. Skye ducked back underneath the counter, just as she heard the bell on the door indicating someone had entered the coffee shop. She was going to look at the person, but her better judgment and heavy footsteps stopped her. "Hello, darling," the voice said, and Skye gritted her teeth and stopped herself from breathing at the sound of Carson's voice. Skye clutched the bat tightly as the footsteps slowly roamed and knocked things over. "Oh, come on. It's rude not to answer, you know. I know you're behind the counter," he said, and Skye felt helpless once again. But the only difference now was that there was a very high chance that she might die right there. "Come out, love, or would I have to drag you out? I seriously don't want to hurt you," he said, but Skye didn't reply, praying that he would leave. But of course, that didn't happen. "Fine then," she heard him mutter, as she felt a rush of air, and in seconds Carson was standing in front of her, dragging her to her feet. "Why would you need that for?" he said mockingly as he snatched the baseball bat from her hands and threw it away from her. "Let me go," Skye screamed, and Carson laughed. "Well, then all of this little play would be for nothing. he said as he effortlessly dragged Sky, who looked for something to help herself escape from him. She was already shaking from fear, and Carson noticed by causing him to smirk and stop walking. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He had all the time in the world. He had already dealt with Liam. He went to the booth and set her down on the stool, till her back was touching the counter. Carson looked at her straight in the eyes. Now tell me, darling, why are you crying? He asked, and Sky looked down sobbing. She was beyond scared, and everyone seemed to play with her emotions. Even Liam. How can she trust the enemy? Please, I just want to go home, she said as she looked down, but Carson just laughed at that. Well, you see, pretty little Sky. Jason also wanted to go home, but Liam didn't let him. Why should I listen to you? Carson said in a sickly sweet voice. I don't know who Jason is, and I don't even know Liam anymore. Please just let me go home. I promise I'll leave. I won't even come back, Sky said, sobbing. Well, let me tell you who Jason actually was, Sky, Carson said, and grabbed a nearby glass. Jason Valentine was my brother, whom Liam dragged out of our manor and tortured him to death, he said, and broke the glass into pieces. Carson was angry. He looked at Sky hungrily, his eyes red. I wish I could help you, but please let me go, Sky said, and Carson wickedly smirked. Oh, you see, sweet Sky, you can help me by doing this, he said, and pinned her hand on the table, stabbing it with the shard of glass in his hand. Sky screamed loudly as he took the glass out of her hand. You see, love, your screams are what I desire. You're more than ear to him. The moon goddess smoldered both of you for each other, and your screams will kill him. The pain you will endure will kill him, Carson said, and brought her bleeding hand to her mouth and sucked at the wound, drawing the blood out. Please me and Liam aren't tell like that, Sky tried to reason with him. As cold sweat began to form on her forehead, her vision was blurry because of the tears, but her mind was clouded. Carson laughed at her weak attempt and pinned her on the counter. Are you telling me you don't know? He said with mockery. Are you telling me that Liam never told you that you both were made for each other? That you're soulmates? Carson said, laughing like a maniac. No wonder he's overprotective of you. No wonder he's always by your side. Because you're oblivious. Carson said, this makes everything so much better now. He would die without any happiness in the world. Carson said happily, then looked straight at Sky. This calls for a celebration, he said, smiling at Sky, who was breathing heavy because of the pain, tears flowing down her cheeks. You're so beautiful, Sky, Carson said, stroking her cheeks, and Sky flinched under his touch. In the spur of the moment, she grabbed the piece of glass shard and stabbed him in the arm, causing him to wobble back from surprise. Sky, although dizzy, managed to get off the stool and run a bit towards the door, but Carson had already recovered and grabbed her arm, slamming her into the wall. This wasn't a very nice thing to do now, was it? He asked, and Sky was about to scream, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Chapter 19. Author's P. Oh, there was darkness everywhere, as cold gusts of wind blew in the dark, cold night. It was 3 on the morning. Liam grunted as he tried to get his hands out of the restraints. Cold sweat was on his forehead as he eyed the bodies. 1,500 or so. The quarter of his pack slaughtered. Beheaded and ripped up members of his pack surrounded the cross. He was stacked to none other than Carson himself. Only if he had listened to Sky, this perhaps could have been prevented. She was right. Those blood-sucking leeches, bloody vampires, had appeared out of thin air as if they just dropped from the sky. They had come into view like smoke, suddenly and all at once. Never had it happened before. It wasn't even possible, but now they had made it possible. The thought of Sky made his heart melt. Was she okay? Was she even alive? He had no idea. Liam tugged at the restraints once more, but the silver rod pierced through his hands on the cross had made him too weak. To my agent extraordinaire, mythical, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He heard a voice scream in the darkness, and he looked up to see Blake and Reuben. More figures start to come into his view as they looked at the bodies of their friends and family. Screams and yells filled the air, as people fell by the bodies of their loved ones. Blake was by his side along with Reuben and two more men, as they undid the ropes. Then took the long metal-like rods from his hand. Making him grunt, he took deep breaths. A guy questioned and began to come near him, but Liam raised his hand, silencing him. Liam was matted in dry blood, his eyes yellow, as he looked at Blake. "Where's Skye?" Liam asked him, hoping that there was a sign of her. A search party is already around the perimeter looking for survivors. They will inform us where she is, one of the guys said, and Liam quickly staggered to his feet. "Fuck them," he murmured underneath his breath, as he rushed to the coffee shop where he had left her. The lights were flickering, resembling a horror flick. He heard Blake calling out to him from behind, but he didn't care. As soon as he entered the coffee shop, his nostrils filled with Skye's overwhelming sweet smell. But it wasn't what he expected. It was the scent of her blood. "Skye," he shouted as he looked around, but there was no reply. His eyes suddenly landed on a broken piece of glass, with dried blood on it, and he instantly knew. It was Skye's. His heart began to pound louder as he looked at the small puddle of blood on the counter and blotch on the wall. "God, oh God," he said in frustration, then kicked the table, watching it fly across the room. Liam clutched his hair in frustration. He was screwed. They had her. They had his mate. "Liam!" Blake screamed, but he didn't turn around. "They have her," Liam said to him. "We could have saved her if you'd had informed us of the attack." "Liam," Blake replied angrily, "informing all of you would have just increased the number of deaths. All of us would have been slaughtered," Liam said, and Blake was now confused. "I think we could have handled a bunch of rogue vampires, Liam," Blake said. "Do you think it was a bunch of rogue vampires that slaughtered a quarter of my pack and stacked me? They are not a bunch of vampires anymore, because vampires just don't smoke into existence." He snapped at Blake. Liam was feeling dizzy as he glared at Blake. "Tear the place down. Find anything and everything that can link us to Carson or his allies. I want 8 of my best tackers on Skye's scent," Liam said, radiating authority, and Blake quickly bowed before leaving. Liam took a deep breath, then walked out of the coffee shop into the cold night. The streets were blood-stained, and pack members were running here and there. There were pack doctors, aiding to the bruised, while coffins had already arrived for the dead. It had always been like that. When anyone died, everyone mourned for a day and only a day, and then moved on. That was the symbol of their strength. They were trained to be heartless, but the drawback was that their heart turned to stone for that. Everyone was in their own world, keeping themselves to their friends and never accepting anyone. That was the main reason why no one as much as even talked to Skye properly, and they had parted on a bad term just because of his temper. He whispered, even though he knew that Skye can't hear him. Liam took a long whiff of air, hoping he would get a scent, any trance of Skye, but there was none. Carson wasn't an idiot. Liam just had to pray that Carson had slipped and left a clue. Anything. He leaned down the side of the coffee shop and took deep breaths. He had lost too much energy, but there was one thing for sure. He wasn't going down without a fight. He wasn't going to give up on her that easily. She was his, and they were meant to be. Even if she rejects him and walk away, he would let her go and then kill himself, but he was going to fight for his mate till his last breath. Hang on, Skye. Chapter 20. Author's P. O.V. Skye, although dizzy, managed to get off the stool and run a bit towards the door, but Carson had already recovered and grabbed her arm, slamming her into the wall. This wasn't a very nice thing to do now, was it? He asked, and Skye was about to scream, but he covered her mouth with his hand. The ground underneath her feet vanished, as she was dragged to God know where the heel of her feet making contact with the floor. She struggled. "NH," she screamed, but the voice was silenced, as Carson loudly growled, and she was dragged into an alley by the coffee shop. No later she has whirled around. Carson slammed her into the wall, pinning her with his body, while she feebly struggled. Tears began to cloud her vision, as Carson grabbed her hand, pinned them above her head, while his other hand remained in her mouth. Skye finally looked at him to see his eyes, which shined a bright red, causing her to stop breathing. "Aren't you pretty?" Carson whispered in a daze, and Skye sobbed, screaming into his hands, "HH. Carson said, and nuzzles his face into her neck. As he began to leave butterfly kisses, Sky sobbed even more at the violation and screamed when he tightened his grip. Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. Now I'll take my hand off your mouth, and if you scream I'll knock you out cold. Clear? Carson whispered, and Sky nodded, as he slowly removed his hand from her mouth. Good girl. Picking her at the corner of her mouth, as she sealed her lips trying to keep in the sob. Please let me go, Sky whispered as more tears fall down her face, thinking of the possibilities this situation can lead. I've wanted you for days, and now I have you. I'm never going to let you go, Carson whispered, and Sky sobbed, looking down, her chest heaving up and down with every sob. What do you want from me? Hoping that her assaulter let her go, she struggled to get him off her, but her petite frame was no match for him. I'm claiming what's mine, little Sky. You're mine, he replied as he pushed her harder into the wall, nuzzling his face into her neck, kissing her, while the pure human girl cried. Please, she said, and Carson brought his mouth to her jaw. She could feel him harder against her, making her even more disgusted. Suddenly he growled and attacked her lips viciously, kissing her, while she screamed. His hands made its way inside her sweater, rubbing circles on her stomach, causing her to sob louder. Carson forced his tongue into her mouth. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. While Sky began to feel lightheaded, the hand inside her shirt began to go down, nipping at her shorts, causing her to scream one more time. With all she had before, finally Carson was off of her. He had a satisfied smirk on his face. That was good. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm, he said, stroking her cheeks. Good night, Sky, he said as he brought his mouth to her neck, and Sky knew what was about to happen. Carson's teeth went onto Sky's skin and she screamed loudly, but they were muffled because of his hand, which was on her mouth again. And as promised, her eyes rolled back into her head and she blacked out. Sky moaned, which came out muffled because of the gag, as she felt throbbing in her head, but her eyes refused to open. Her back was stiff as she shook her head and consciousness returned to her. She remembered everything that happened, every single detail. She tried to touch her forehead, but her hands wouldn't move. She tried again and realized that they tied behind her back. Soon she became aware of the fact that she was tied, gagged and blindfolded on a chair. She tried to get her hands out of the restraints, but the ropes just cut her skin. She had already lost feeling in her feet, and now she was losing movement in her hands too. She didn't as much make a sound, as she continued to struggle, finally shaking her head to get the blindfold off, which didn't even move. She finally threw her head down, exhausted, and took deep breaths. A migraine was working its way through. She tugged at the ropes again, but nothing worked. She began to feel helpless and sobs racked through her body. I was wondering, when would you give up? A familiar chilling voice said. Sky didn't say a word, but her breathing did quicken. No need to be scared, love, Carson said mockingly, and as she heard footsteps approach her, she began sobbing. She tried to say something, but her words came out muffled. What did you say? I didn't hear you, Carson said, and Sky sobbed at his mockery. Soon the blindfold was ripped off of her eyes and Sky blinked rapidly. Her vision was blurry, but her eyes landed on the silhouette, the enthusiasm, leaning in front of her. I was wondering when you were going to wake up. I thought I had killed you before the fun, he said, and in a split motion was in front of her, causing her to scream into the gag. Carson grabbed her chin and forced her to look at him. This is just a mere beginning. I'll be back, Carson said, and smiled his wicked grin, disappearing into nothingness. Chapter 21. Sky's P. Oh, this is just a mere beginning. I'll be back, Carson said, and smiled his wicked grin, disappearing into nothingness. I looked around the dark, dim room. My frown deepened as I noticed that I was in some kind of cottage of some sort as I looked out the window to see trees surrounding me. I looked around the empty, small room inside in relief, and I saw nothing or no one. I was alone. Many questions roamed through my head. Where am I? What does he want from me? My heart rate speeds up as many stupid scenarios entered my head. I started shaking my hands again, trying to release myself, but it was of no use. I was tied to the chair tightly. That worried me a lot, and I started shaking my head. I whined out in pain. I wonder if someone's looking for me. I closed my eyes and tried to stop the tears from falling. I let out a frightened sigh but opened them when I heard something from outside. Was Carson back? My eyes widened as I heard someone running and tried to open the door. I furrowed my brows in confusion when banging on the door was heard. Whoever was outside wanted to get in. My eyes widened in fear and a gasp escaped my lips when the door flew open. My eyes widened even more as I saw the person in front of me, Skye. Blake whispered, looking relieved and happy. But I know that he's going to kill me. I know that he's not my Blake. I remembered everything that happened that day. Please don't hurt me, I said and tried to roll away, but Blake puts his foot on my shoulder, preventing me. Liam, your little mate is going to pay for your mistakes, Blake said, when suddenly Liam's large wolf burst out, killing Blake. Stay away from me. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Skye, I'm your Blake. Please let me help you, he said and came running towards me. I sucked in a breath. Should I trust him? I was really confused. And how did he find me this fast? Something was telling me to trust him, and I nodded. He immediately ripped the ropes from my hand and feet. And that's when I noticed him. He looked horrible. He looked tired and afraid. I was so afraid that I lost you. I was afraid that I'd never see you again. He whispered and hugged me. Blake, I thought you were, I sobbed and hugged him back. Skye, what you saw that day was an illusion created by those leeches to hurt you, to make you weak. Blake replied, and I gave him a weak smile. How did you found me? I asked softly. I honestly don't know. We searched everywhere for you. Then I found this cottage and knew you were in here because of your scent. I was terrified that I lost you, Skye. I felt tears threaten to escape at his words. Come on, let's head back, Blake said, and I nodded my head. Office P. Skye took a deep breath as she slid into the passenger seat of Blake's car. A Corolla. Blake was already seated in the driver's seat and Ruben in the back, texting away on his cell phone. Whom are you texting, Ruben? Blake asked. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He replied. You seem awfully quiet, Skye. Everything okay? Ruben asked, bringing Skye out from her trance. Yeah, I'm fine, she replied. She was never much of a good liar. You and Liam seem a bit distant that morning. I was wondering if you want to talk about it, he asked, and Skye shook her head, still looking out of the window. That morning. How long was she there? It's nothing, she replied, even though she wanted to talk about it. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. She wanted to talk about Liam. She missed him. She wondered if he's looking for her. She immediately shook her head and forced those thoughts out. She noticed the car had come to a halt and they were in the parking lot of Liam's mansion. Chapter 22 Authors P. Oh, Liam looked like a wreck. He felt like a wreck too. His eyes were bloodshot and his body was sore. He wasn't taking Skye's absence very well. He had a 5 o'clock shave and his clothes were dirty and bloody, the same way they had been when he went to pack. The day he was raided by Carson. He looked older than most men of age. There was a knock on his door and Liam hummed gruffly in response and the door opened. A member of the pack walked in. He was very muscular, heavily tatted and bald with an eyebrow piercing, but Liam failed to remember his name. Sir, the search party has found your mother's body just outside the perimeter, the guy said, emotional and Liam closed his eyes. 3 days ago, when Skye was taken away from him, he had got a notice that the pack where he had sent his mother and Annabella at Ireland had been ambushed by Carson's men. He had no hope either his mother or Annabella would even be alive. Though the news didn't strike him too much. He was never close to his mother anyway. And it was the seed that his pure-blood parents planted for which he was paying today. She deserved to die. Besides, she never cared for him or Annabella. Always demanding, not even caring once. Even slightly abusive. He had seen bruises on Anna and therefore kept her away from her most of the time. But he did care about Annabella. He treated her like a baby, spoiled her too much, but not enough to make her a brat. In a way, he had brought her up and felt a strong connection with her. She was his sister after all. What about Anna? Liam asked. We found her underneath the wreckage. She's fine. A few bruises, but okay. But she's very much shaken. She keeps asking for her mom. The guy said. I'll deal with her. We join the search party. Liam said sternly, and the guy bowed in response. Before closing the door shut, Liam sighed and slouched in the chair while massaging his temples. He needed Skye to be with him, where she belonged. It didn't help that both of them left on a bad note, and it wasn't her fault either. She deserved those answers, but he was to self, sent to give her those. And now God knows what Carson was feeding her brain with. He heard Annabella scream and flinched at the pitch of the sound before sighing and getting up. His sister was his responsibility. He took a deep breath and left the office with stiff strides. As he approached Annabella's room, the sobbing and screaming got louder. She was mumbling something while sobbing, but as her speech wasn't as refined, he could barely understand what she was saying. The second he was close to the door, he slammed it open and his sister's cries stopped abruptly. He examined the room. Everything was the way it was. Pink. The only difference was that his sister had a huge bruise on her forehead, and there was an elderly lady in the room. Annabella was sitting on the lap of an elderly member of the pack who was trying to calm her down but failing miserably. Thank you for your help, but you may leave, Liam said, looking at the kind lady who smiled at him and bowed before leaving. Liam locked the door behind her, then looked at Hannah, who was sniffing and tears flowed down her cheeks. Now why is my princess crying? Liam asked and sat on Anna's bed, and she jumped onto his lap like a squirrel and hugged him, then began sobbing again. Liam picked her up and walked around the room while holding on to her. Hey, it's okay, Liam said, and he tried to calm her down. I want Mama, Anna said, crying, and Liam stroked her back gently. She's not coming home, but she won't be happy when she sees you crying, right? Liam said, and Annabella sniffed. Why? Annabella asked, and tears began to fill her eyes. Even Liam was breaking by the minute, but he gave out a fake laugh. She's an angel now. She's with Dad, Liam said, and I looked at him before she clapped her hands. Mama will be with unicorns, Anna said happily, and Liam smiled at her and kissed her forehead, mentally praying that Skye wasn't going to be joining her. But right now I'm going to send a lady, and I want you to fill your tummy and go to sleep, Liam said, and Anna nodded. Liam left the room and asked the lady to feed Anna and tuck her in. He made his way back to his office and firmly closed the door and sat on his chair behind the desk, pondering where Carson could be. Where could Carson keep her? Liam thought as he tried to think of a place. They had to be near, for Carson to attack so frequently. Maybe he was at the place where it all began. What if he was at the manor? There was a slim chance, but he needed to find her, and he needed to find her now, before everything goes out of hand. Not that anything was in his hand, but he couldn't waste any second. He should send a party there. He got up to do that when suddenly his phone buzzed. Chapter 23. Author's P. Oh, but he should send a party there. He got up to do that when suddenly his phone buzzed. He quickly opened the message and read it. We found her, Reuben. Liam stood in his room at the pack house. He paced in the room, finally stopping at the window. Skye's cardigan was wrapped around his knuckles, which he would smell every once in a while. Losing himself to the sensation, he could still taste her sweet skin. When he had kissed her on the cheek, he wanted to mark her, but it would have been too dangerous. Marking her without any medical attention could have killed her. She would have bled to death. He brought the clothed knuckle back to his nose, taking a whiff of it before kissing it and going back to bed. He was tired, very tired. He looked around his room, which had crimson arc walls and everything black, from his silk bedspread to the dark lamp above his bed. All black and dark, just like him. Dark. He gets into his kind-sized bed and gently unwrapped the cloth from his hand, placing it on the other side of the bed, where Sky should be, where she belonged. But for now, the cardigan would do. He looked back up at the ceiling, his thoughts going to that blood-sucking leech. He would have to do something about him, make sure that he stays away from her, far away for that matter. His hand made his way into the pocket of his jeans, taking out the death sticks which he had grown accustomed to after the death of his father at the age of 16. He used to be normal back then, had friends, a prankster too. But that all changed when the weight of an entire pack was put on his shoulder. He cut himself off, getting tattooed and pierced step by step. Now his body was covered in tattoos, adding to his scary aura. He lit the cigarette, placing it into his mouth, while taking long drags in his bed, devising a way to get rid of Carson. What to do? He grabbed his cell phone, calling the boy, who he finally found a good use of. "Hello." David picked up after the third drink. "David." Liam replied in a manner of greeting, and the boy at the other side became attentive. "Oh, Alpha. Is there a problem?" The boy asked, probably scared now. "But I want you to get me information on Carson. I want the folder ready by tomorrow evening. On my desk. Is it clear?" Liam said sternly, and the boy cringes. Yes. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." He replied, and Liam smiled with satisfaction. "Good." Liam replied and ends the line. David was the Zeta of the pack, and it seemed just right to ask him to get it for him. Liam gets out of the bed and began pacing the room once again, puffing smoke out of his nose and mouth every once in a while. But it failed to calm him down. He grabbed the cardigan again, taking a long whiff of it before placing it down on the bed very precisely. I want you now," he said in sighs, knowing he had to wait. He didn't know how he was going to explain everything to his little mate. He didn't even know where to begin. She was so innocent, so naive. But no matter how innocent she wasn't an E. He went to the full-length mirror at the corner of the room and stared at his reflection. He looked at the tattoos that covered every inch of his torso and arms, extending to his fingers, his snake bite still intact and his gauges adding to the mystery. The cigarette secured between his index and middle finger of his right hand made its way to his mouth. He took a long whiff before exhaling the smoke onto his reflection in the mirror. He was dark. He was dangerous. He was uncontrollable. And he knew that. He looked at his reflection one more time before throwing away the cigarette and padding back to his bed. He threw the silk covers over his naked body, before grabbing the cardigan and draping it over himself. Imagining his little mate on top of him, straddling him, he chuckled at all the dirty thoughts that were going through his mind before his eyes began to get heavy and he fell into a deep slumber. "Skies, P." I noticed the car had come to a halt and we were in the parking lot of Liam's mansion. Blake looked upset, angry and confused, yet he still grabbed my hand to comfort me. I looked over at Ruben and he gave me a small smile. I sucked in a breath and I took a step away from them. A tear slipped out of my eyes and I turned around and ran. I ran away from them and entered the pack house as my heart beat aggressively. I ran into my room and slammed the door close. I laid on the bed, then let the tears I was holding back fall. I go cry or turn into a psychopath when I'm mad. I was so upset that I just don't know what to do with myself. I just wanted to cry. That's what I do. I can't hold it back anymore. "Sky," a voice called my name from the hallway. "Dad, are you all right?" He continued when I didn't reply. I was trying to hold my sobs back. "Come on in. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." My voice so low, but it's loud enough for him to listen. The door cracks open and he opened the door slowly. He looked at me and smiled. It was a sympathetic smile, actually. "Why were you crying, Sky?" he asked, worried, causing me to take a deep and sit up, leaning my back against the bed frame. "It's nothing. Seriously. You don't need to worry. I'm fine," I said, and he gives out a soft laugh. "It's not that easy. You're my daughter. It worries me," Dad replied honestly. brushing a few strands of hair from my face, causing me to look down. "Can I ask you something?" I finally asked, breaking the silence, and he nodded. "Of course, sweetie," Dad replied, giving me an encouraging smile. I took a deep breath, not daring to look at him as the words left my mouth. "Do you hate me?" I asked and peeked at him from under my eyelashes, who was just shaking his head, confused at my question. "Of course not. How can you say that?" Dad replied, and I looked at him. "Then why did you ask Mom to abort me?" I asked, and it was like the world had stopped, as Dad looked at me with wide eyes. "How?" he began to say, but I cut him off. "No one told me. I found out myself." I replied quickly, and he looked at the floor ashamed. "So is it true?" I asked, and he nodded. "I found out your mother was pregnant with you when I was in college." Abortion was the first thought that came to my mind. "But I'm thankful that your mother didn't listen to me. I'm proud of you, darling, and I love you a lot," Dad said, and then pulled me in for a hug, causing me to smile. Suddenly my phone began to ring, making us pull away. Chapter 24, authors P.O.V. Suddenly Sky's phone began to ring, making them pull away. She grabbed her iPhone 7 from the bedside table, which was a present from her mother, and smiled as she looked at the caller ID. She thought that she had lost her phone. Maybe Liam had put it there. She looked at her father, then said, "Do you mind if I?" She trails off, shaking the phone in her hand, and her father nodded, leaving the room as she receives the call. "Hi, Jacob," Sky said as a smile crept on her face. Jacob had been her best friend since kindergarten. Even was a badass but a complete softie with her because of her innocence. Sometimes it shocked him how heat-hearted player was friend with a girl who hadn't as much as hit a fly. He remembered how a guy had pushed her once, and she hadn't even screamed or shouted at that idiot, even though he had beat the crap out of that asshole for hurting his best friend when he saw the bruise. "Where were you? I thought that you were going to call me, but you never did." "I missed you," he replied dramatically. "I'm sorry, Jacob, and I missed you too." "What time is it there?" 6 in the morning. "Your place," she replied, causing the boy's eyes to widen. 7 in the evening. "Wow, we are so far away. A few days ago, we were practically underneath the same roof. Now we are miles away from each other. I hate it," he said, honestly, causing Sky to frown. "Me too. It doesn't feel like home here, Jacob, even though my dad explained about the abortion, but I just want to come back home." Not telling him the whole truth, and Jacob took a deep breath. "What did he said about it?" he asked, and Sky told him the entire thing, partially smiling, while Jacob just frowned, even though he was happy for his best friend. "I guess that's good," he said, and she nodded, forgetting he can't see her. "But I want to come back, Jacob. I miss everything. I miss my mom. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noben, heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm," she said, and that's when her voice began to break, and for a split moment, she removed the cell phone from her ear and takes deep breaths, but put it back in place because she didn't want him to cut off the call and lose the little comfort she was having. "Skydon, do you dare to cry? You're so strong. We've talked about this. Your mom would want you to be happy, not mourn over her. Come on, send me a toothy selfie. I want to see those pretty dimples," he said, causing her to smile. "You're the best, Jacob," she said after a few minutes. "I know, right?" Her friend cheerfully yet cocky replied, trying to make her laugh, but she could sense the faint sadness in his voice. "Hey, did you know that?" And with that, Jacob begins to tell her about this new girl in school who's actually, as he rudely claims, a whore and slept with everyone in her previous school. Honestly, she thought it was girls who chatted about this stuff, and she came up to me and I was like, "Lol, you ain't get any of me, bitch," Jacob said, and Sky laughed. "So like him, Jacob, you seriously need to get a life," she replied, and heard him shrug. "Don't need a life while I have you," he countered, and she chuckled. "Sky, I want to tell you something important, but promise me you won't get angry," Jacob said, and Sky furrowed her eyebrows. "Did you get a girl pregnant?" she asked, but he laughed at the other end. "No. God, Cookie, you always find a way to make me laugh. But that's not it," he said, but the nervousness in his voice didn't vanish. Then what is it? God, Jacob, you're scaring me, she said, getting up from the bed and begins pacing the room. Sky, you remember how I used to come over to your house when we were young and your uncle told us stories about his trips and missions? Jacob asked. What does this have to do with anything? Her heartbeat increased. She was getting a bad feeling about this. He fascinated me so much, Sky. I wanted to follow his footsteps. Be a hero, just like him. I have an exam last year for the army. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to be scared. But I failed it, he said, and Sky's heart stopped. Why are you telling me this now? She whispered, already knowing where the conversation was going. She felt tears filling her eyes and her hands shaking. I got a call yesterday. They said I got accepted. I'm leaving, Sky, he said. No. You can't do this, she whispered as tears fall down her eyes. Cookie, please try to understand. It's been my dream, he said, and Sky cuts him off. It's been your dream. Your dream is to die. To die in gruesome ways with the bullet piercing every inch of your skin. Sky said as she sobbed. It would be an honor to die for my country, Jacob said loudly. Did you think of your family? Your baby brother? Me did think of us even one bit before making this decision. Everyone in the army dies. Everyone gets killed. You saw how I lived my life when Uncle used to be gone. Do you want that for your family? Do you want that for your brother who's only 12? You want to torture them like that? You want me to go through that pain again, huh? Do you want them to sit in front of the TV every single hour of the day watching all those soldiers die? Begging God that's not you, like I used to for Uncle. Do you want your family to break down and die slowly as bullets fired, killing everyone one by one? Do you want them to hug their cell phones, praying that you might call, now a second later, because they don't want to waste a moment without hearing your voice? Would all of that be an honor to you too? Shut up. Shut the fuck up. I die happy knowing I saved lives, that I contributed in keeping my country free. So you can grasp the fact that I'm leaving, not so you can be bitch about it. You either respect my choices or don't. It was your uncle who was on that battlefield, and you were whining because he wasn't there to keep you company. Can you get any lower than that? I thought you were better than those slutty, disgusting girls at school, but you know what, get to terms with this and stop being a bloody fucking tramp about it. Jacob screamed at her, cutting her desperate soft whispers off midway. She felt broken. Every word he said pierced her heart. Is this what he thought of their years of friendship? Is this it? It's nice to know what you think of me. That was your opinion about our years of friendship, I guess. Congratulations then. I hope you stay happy. I'm sorry for being the bloody fucking tramp, for being depressed after Mom's death. I'm sorry for starving myself, for self-harming, but I'm most sorry for wishing that, like other teenagers, I had the privilege of having a normal life. But to you, wishing that means being bloody fucking tramp, and a desperate, and I'm sorry for trying to drown myself last year because of it. So yeah, I won't ever warn you that your friends and family might go through this pain. Your brother might go through what I did, because then he would be a bloody fucking tramp, and a desperate bitch, right? It was nice knowing you, Jacob. Sky, I'm so he begins to say, but Sky cut the call. A silent sobs racked through her body. She couldn't take it anymore. How could he? She felt used and dragged. She had never said such words in her life, nor had she imagined her best friend calling her that. But she guessed. They weren't friends after all. I mean, you don't say words like that to your friends. Friends that turned into siblings over the years. That's when she noticed that Linda and Blake were standing at the doorway. Her dad nowhere at sight. Sky, Linda begins to say, but Sky stared at her, sobbing before shaking her head and running out of the pack house. She could hear Linda screaming her name along with Blake, but all those voices were faint. The only thing she could hear now was her loud sobs as she clutched the cell phone to her chest, running to the great beyond.